There's something so incredibly sacred about that silence before we begin. It's so different from our normal engagement of life, where we tend to be so quick to rush into conversation, to rush into finding solutions. But this silence, this moment before we begin, is what allows us to create a space that honors where all things come from. Almost as if the silence is our heart's trust in what is actually true. Knowing in some way, somehow, the truth is already present. The answer already here. Welcome to Kashkai's Meditation and Spiritual Musings. I'm your host. Super honored to be gathering once again to explore the magic of life. And my goodness, it's always such a journey to open ourselves up and to explore the depth of life's miracle. Today, the subject matter is the art of peaceful conversation. The format is a guided meditation, which I feel will serve as a tool that prepares one's heart for conversation. And so after we're done here, grab a hold of the recording. And if you ever find yourself getting ready for a conversation, you might want to listen to it. And then after that meditation, I will ramble a little bit about the subject matter, and then we can engage in some dialogue and Q&A. Let's begin the meditation. The opportunity of this short meditation is to allow ourselves to ground in what is real, to connect with what is actually true. Let us find an alignment with this intent. An openness, a willingness to see the real. In this moment, we can surrender the dance of the mind, hoping, wishing, looking, wanting, and see that we've played this game many, many times before, only to find ourselves coming back to this place of stillness, surrendering everything we think we know. we are making contact with something within ourselves that deeply honors the truth. While at the same time, we can acknowledge any agitation within our being, any anxiety, any nervousness. And we can acknowledge that what this is simply a fear. And we can make space for that fear. We can allow the fear. And in our allowing, we can acknowledge the real issue. Surely we can recognize that the mind has all of its stories, all of its excuses. But what's the real issue? The real issue is that this situation, this circumstance, is an invitation to honor the truth, and we're scared. We're scared because in our honoring of the truth, we are invited to let go of what is not true. Please recognize this. Our fear is losing what we're holding on to. And we're holding on because we are afraid of the unknown. However, in these brief moments together, we are going to honor the unknown. We are going to recognize that tomorrow has always been the unknown. And we have only ever tricked ourselves into believing that we know. And so here we are invited to acknowledge what's true. And maybe a way of looking at this is we can acknowledge that what's true is I don't really know how this should go. I don't really know what should happen. I don't really know what's best. But something within me is open to find out. And this openness begins right now. This openness is a trust in life. And we can acknowledge the failure of trusting in something other than the truth of life. Impossible to count all the moments of disappointment where we put our faith and trust in something out there, only to watch it slip through our fingers. And so right now, we acknowledge the reality of this, and we trust in what can actually be trusted. We can trust in what is actually real. We can trust in the truth. And in this trusting of what is real, we can release every other human being into their own naturalness. We can extend freedom to others to see what they see. We can trust others to the miracle of life. We can honor their journey while also knowing we have no clue what is best for them. We don't know where they are on their path. We don't know what life is doing through them. In the same way that no one knows what's best for you, even though surely there are many people who think they do. Breathe into this freedom that allows everyone to be as they are. See the beauty of this unfolding, where we as individual expressions of life explore such a landscape only to discover a new depth of love. Only to find ourselves getting scared in the process. And let us acknowledge the sweet innocence of this fear. That whenever we act out violently, whenever we express unkindness, it's only because we are scared. And that's okay. And so I encourage you to see the heart of the matter. To see what's happening below the surface. To see that the only thing anyone is actually looking for is the truth of what they are. The love they crave is the love of what they are. Looking to reconnect with a freedom that allows them to be them, allows them to be confused if they're confused, allows them to be hurting if they are hurting. For all of these things are held in the arms of love. This is your opportunity for love to be seen. We can lay down the defensiveness. We can lay down the movement to protect who we think we are. We can let all of that go and let love be seen. And in this great allowance, you will discover the love you're looking for. For the love you are looking for is a love that is waiting to look out from behind your eyes. Are you open to see love? The art of peaceful conversation. One of the major difficulties as it relates to connecting with anything we might define as peaceful is that we are looking to connect with an image of peaceful rather than the reality of peace. And to quickly explore that, we can look at the analogy of the forest. You can walk through the forest and say, I'm looking for a peaceful forest, which means this should be more organized. It should look a different way. We should change something. And in your attempt to capture an image of peaceful forest, you start withholding freedom from all of the elements in the forest. You start saying, you shouldn't be like this, you should be more like that. You shouldn't be what you are so that I could have peace. Do you see the insanity of such a thing? How we can create an idea of what a peaceful forest is and not see that it is already peaceful before you even try and change anything. The peace is already there, just not seen. And as one begins to connect with the reality of peace, you begin to see that everything that's happening in the forest is part of that peace. Everything that moves, everything that blooms, everything that dies is intertwined with peace. Please notice this, because you can easily recognize the inherent difficulty in being peaceful in the forest is to think that there's something misplaced, which signals what? That there is the appearance of lack of peace, not in the forest, but in you. Do you see how easily we can do this? We experience a discord within ourselves, what we might call a lack of peace, and then we project it outward. And we try and regain that inner peace by having the external match an image of peace, birthed from the mind that says, if only it was like this, if only it was like that. In all of these if onlys, in some way or another, moves to withhold love, withhold freedom from something in life. And I bring up this analogy because as we speak to the play of peaceful conversation, the mind immediately gets an image of what that might look like. And I'm telling you, it's not that. The piece of conversation that I'm pointing to is not an image of what it looks like on the outside, but it is pointing to a peace within yourself. And this is the real art of it. For the art, nature, is an effortlessness from within you. Almost as if it's what you are, not something you are trying to attain. It's natural. Much of what makes conversation in general so difficult. And again, the disclaimer is that this is not an opportunity to judge yourself. But the difficulty in conversation is that the human being is trying to get something from the conversation. And just notice what happens here when you're trying to get something. If you're sensitive, if you're tuned in, you'll notice that there is this anxiety. There is this tension that is afraid you might not get what you want. And here is the root of the inner war that does not allow for peace. You can see that this absence of peace shows itself because there's a war on the inside. And what is this war other than a fear that you will not get what you want? And so you are fighting in some way or another to make sure you get it. You see the nature of peace. Even to create an image of it, you can notice that what the image points to, what the image says, is that all is well. Such a statement, all is well has been the spiritual conclusion for all of time. For one recognizes all is well, and you are connected with a state of being that reflects that wellness. And that wellness is a recognition that nothing is missing. And just notice that for yourself, that when it is seen that nothing's missing, when it is seen that all is incredibly well, there is this energy or environment of peace in your being. And naturally, this is the invitation of meditation, is to see that all is well, that actually nothing's missing. And further than that, actually nothing is being threatened. And you'll notice that this is the chaos before you enter meditation, is it seems as if there's all these threats. And the mind frantically moves around trying to protect this and that and the other. And the space of meditation allows us to come home and see what actually is happening. And in the reality of this, we realize, oh, everything's fine. And then peace returns. As an invitation to prepare one's heart for peaceful conversation with another human being. Before you engage, I invite you to get radically honest with yourself that this other person does not have what you want. And notice how what you think you want from them is for them to not be them, so that you could have peace. And we can acknowledge that that does not work. And so even if the mind has a difficulty understanding how that could be true, can you find a space within yourself that is at least open to such a thing? Open to the possibility that my discord, my anxiety, my fear isn't really about them. Can you release them? Because I'll tell you, if you cannot, you will enter a space of conversation automatically with defense, looking to protect what you want. And you will ultimately end up withholding love from them, which is probably not what you want. One of the things that I find that helps in preparing a space in the heart is to acknowledge the real issue, and that real issue being that I'm afraid. That if there is any discord, if there is any perceived lack of harmony or peace, what's the real issue? I'm afraid. And notice how quickly the mind wants to say it's something else. It's because of this, and this, and this. But really, when you unravel it, I'm scared. And it's funny because maybe in our culture, to admit one is afraid is perceived to be a weakness. However, I would invite you to see that this is one of your greatest strengths. This space of vulnerability with yourself. Such a space of vulnerability acknowledges and honors the truth. And it is in this honoring, in this devotion to what's true, that the truth can actually show itself and point you home towards what you actually crave. And just notice this playfully and quickly, that if one continues to buy into the idea that the issue is the other person, do you see how that will never lead you toward what you crave? Ever. To blame in such a way, however innocent in nature, is ultimately to delay what it is you crave. And what we're avoiding in that delay is the root issue that I'm afraid, as we think there's something wrong with that. Your willingness to acknowledge the real issue is what positions you to connect with the real healing. For if the real issue isn't acknowledged, how can it be healed? With a heart that is prepared with openness, we begin to see the magic of conversation, the beauty of its play, the opportunity of such a dance between human beings, sharing what's happening on the inside. Clearly, this is a landscape for us to discover, for us to explore, for us to find ourselves in some way or another. This openness extends a freedom for other people to engage that discovery. Do you ever notice that part of the difficulty in conversation is almost not wanting other people to see what they see? Like they're getting it wrong. But fundamentally, do you see that they are allowed to see what they see? Whether you like it or not, they are free to see what they see. And let me point with such a statement that says, you are only concerned about what they see because you think it's about you. Notice this. You think it touches you. And because you think it touches you, you want to protect yourself and have them see something different. Now imagine for a moment that what they see literally has nothing to do with you. Do you see how you naturally extend a freedom for them to see whatever they see? There's no anxiety about what they see. There's no caution about what they see. Just notice that the underlying tension stems from a belief that what they see is about you. Or what they see can somehow be an interruption to your peace. And this also points to what might be seen as a monumental challenge of being human, but what seems to be our desperate attempt to take everything personally. And you can notice the things which you take personally, there's a movement within you that tries to control those things. And as we explore these things, understand that this is an opportunity to just look at it. I'm not inviting you to create some massive distance between where you might find yourself and a perceived end result in what I'm saying. But with an openness of heart, can you recognize the humor in the insanity? A willingness to look at the way the human conditioning functions based on its belief picked up from some fearful source, and to see how it operates in what can truly be an insane way. And so I invite you to recognize that when somebody comments on a painting, they're not commenting on the painting. They are commenting on what they see. What they see. Based on their life experience, based on their patterns of conditioning, based on their life journey that is unfolding into their own play of discovery. Do you recognize this? That in order for love to expand, you have to navigate through that where love isn't seen. Please see this. That in order for love to expand, there has to be the play of contraction. And you've seen this in other human beings, where they might go through a freak out, which might be seen as a contraction. And in some way or another, that leads to an expansion. This also points to an openness to allow contraction. Similarly, you can imagine yourself looking at a painting with someone, and to you, you find it extraordinarily beautiful, and the person standing next to you is terribly offended. they think there's something wrong with it. All bothered. Do you recognize that space within you, very peaceful in nature, that allows them to be bothered? That says, that's okay. I can understand why you don't like it. That's fine. Allowing them to have their experience. Now imagine it was your painting.
When the understanding is about personal attack, how can we still remain the peace?
To see that it's not a personal attack. Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. See, understand this. Imagine you're at a museum looking at a painting with someone. And then you're looking at your painting. You see how it's totally different. You think that their comment about the painting is a comment about you. Do you see that's impossible? And again, don't try and do something with what I'm saying. Just see the truth of it. To see that it is impossible that what somebody thinks about this painting is about me. Yes, I can see how I can interpret it that way. I see how I can believe that and subsequently feel that. But is it really true? That's the question. And granted, there is a lifetime of conditioning, of patterns of belief that has bought into such a lie that it's about you. And so we have a play of conditioned momentum where that belief has a certain energy behind it, which will continue to play out in your human experience. But the doorway that I'm showing you is a door that allows you to stop feeding it. I'm not talking about stopping it. I'm pointing to an understanding of what's actually happening. I see the illustration of extending freedom for another person to see what they see as you're observing your painting together. And to really see that their opinion, their perspective isn't about you. You can completely allow them to have their view. Even if they were to say, man, I really don't like that, you could say, tell me more. Really, that's interesting. Yeah, tell me more. And you see that willingness to allow them to be them helps them to explore themselves, gives them a permission to be themselves. I mean, imagine this. You can see on a very practical level that if somebody has issue with you and you say, tell me more, how comforting that is for them. That it's okay. It's almost like a loving embrace.
It's the same way you'd speak to a child.
Exactly. Exactly. With an unconditional love. Naturally, what I'm pointing to might be seen as a particular skill set. However, we have to be cautious in this because this particular skill set isn't something that you go out and master. The skill set is a natural byproduct of seeing the truth. The truth of what you are, the truth of life, and the truth of other people. And I put the caution there because the mind can try and take what I'm saying and try and make something happen. But really, in what I'm saying, it's a subtle way of pointing back to the truth of things. The difficulty always arises because there's some form of defense. And all forms of defense are protecting something.
Sometimes it's necessary.
Yes, it seems like that.
Imagine I give you extreme case.
No, we can't do extreme cases because it's not your experience.
Okay, my experience. That's exactly my experience. Someone accuses you to do something you have never done
Mhm.
and affect your life. You need to go to the court. How you could stay calm and love to say, tell me more.
Okay.
For something you have never done.
Well, I'm getting into that.
That's what I talk about when it becomes a personal attack that affects every
Right.
aspect of your life. Then how do you do it?
If there's defense, then you're protecting something. Not wrong or bad. But the question is, how honest can you be with yourself about what you're protecting? And this will prove to be the great spiritual challenge. How deeply can you go into your own self-sincerity? Because on the surface, the mind says, I'm protecting my job. I'm protecting my relationship. I'm protecting my future. You see, those are quite surface level things in the world. And we can look at our own experience and see how anxiously intertwined we have become with protecting the surface level things. And granted, we have such a short time to sit here and point to these things. But maybe we can just point to the end and you'll find your way there. The more deeply you investigate what you're protecting, the more honest you become with yourself, what you're protecting. You will see that what you're trying to protect isn't a real thing. Thus, it needs no protection. And you can see this in a very practical way in your minor disturbances throughout the day. You can see that the little annoyances, those little movements to control this and that, they're trying to protect something that doesn't really need protected. Those tiny things might be your plans for tomorrow, what you think should happen or shouldn't happen, in such a way that as you investigate them, you realize, oh, I can just let that go, actually. That's not really a big deal at all. And just notice this in your own experience, how the mind has been convinced that something's a big deal. And then given enough time and openness, you actually see that it's not at all. I thought it was a big deal. And in this, you can see that whatever you think is a big deal, you can't really trust your own thinking, because you have thought things were a big deal before, only to find out they were not. And back then, you had all your reasons and all your excuses about why it was a big deal. In the same way now, you still might have all your reasons. But I can promise you that as you go down this rabbit hole of discovery, as it unravels, the deeper you go, you will see that none of it is a big deal. It's not to say you're not allowed to see it as a big deal. That's totally fine. That's part of the play. But if anything, it's an invitation to approach it with a little bit of openness that says, maybe I don't really know. Yes, it seems like a big deal, but maybe I don't really know. And at some point in our conversations with others, the real crux of the spiritual discovery is going to become engaged. Which is almost like saying, at some point in your life, and many times throughout your life, you're going to be faced with a very direct truth, which could also be said as you're going to be faced with the reality of your own darkness. In the reality of this innocent darkness is you're going to see that you are withholding love in order to protect your own imagined sense of separate self-importance. You are withholding love to protect your ego structure. You are withholding love to protect who you think you are. And this can be a very dark night for the soul.
But it's a natural instinct to try to withhold this, isn't it, to some extent?
It's learned. There's a natural aspect of it that facilitates the learning. But there's a very ingrained conditioned pattern that we pick up through our human experience.
For example, I have experiences here where, I'm usually very generally friendly and kind to people. But after a while, whether you're at the electric company, the finance company, the hospital, you get tired of being treated rudely.
Right.
So it gets to a point where you're like, well, I don't think I'm going to be so friendly anymore because the reaction I just get back is rude.
Right.
That plays back to the taking things personally, I think, because you're expecting, I'm kind, so I want something in return. If you're not giving me that kindness in return, then I'm gonna stop being kind.
Mm-hmm.
It could be out of the rule to everyone, it's not just to you.
Yeah.
Don't think it's so personal.
I had
That expectation.
Expectation.
Drop the expectation.
you see the the expectation is a wanting. I want people to be kind to me. And forever, the wanting will be that hindrance that makes all of this impossible. All of it impossible. Have you ever had an experience with another human being where, from your own sincerity, you're being kind and you're being loving, but they think you're being a dick?
Just like this.
Just notice it, because I go through this constantly. But just notice how, like, there's a very genuine sincerity within you that cares about another human being, that loves them, but all they can see is that you're being the opposite of what you're being. And there's nothing you can say. They see what they see. Right? The gift in you expressing that sincerity of kindness, that sincerity of love, that is for you. That is what you give to yourself. Whether it is understood, whether it is seen, is irrelevant. And this is often where we get confused, is because we're almost trying to take on spiritual qualities so that we can get something back from the world. Like says, okay, help me be peaceful, help me to stop freaking out so that these other people will finally like me. And this isn't at all what spirituality is pointing to. It's almost like the truth seeker is trying to get rid of the storms, not realizing that the real truth is attempting to connect you with a peace that allows the storms. Another way of saying it is the truth seeker is trying to find a truth that helps them to be more accepted by the world. And the real truth is connecting you to a sincerity that allows the world to reject you. Because you see that it's impossible for the world to reject you. And so there is a freedom extended that says, let the storm be the storm. You can recognize this, that it's like when somebody perceivably doesn't like you, that can take on the quality of a storm. Or, oh no, something's wrong, something's chaotic. Do you see how to connect with the truth that no one likes you or doesn't like you puts you in the center of the storm? In the eye of the storm? In the eye of the storm, there is no storm. Right? The storm is all around. To stand in the middle, there's stillness. Right? So it's not getting rid of the storm. It's seeing that the storm doesn't touch you.
I still have difficulty in a way, like, after I have been through in my life, I really don't care about what other people see, what other people think of me. Like, really not at all. Doesn't touch me. That's why even people think that I'm a prick, I still give a big smile because I truly feel sorry for your situation, even it's nothing to do with me, but I still could give you a smile and I feel sorry. However, when some people's action actually affect your life in a much deeper level, so it's not just talk, not just about attention, that actually give you a lot of difficulties in life.
Right.
How do I deal with that with love? It for me also in terms of long term. It's not once or twice.
Right.
It's not 1 month, it's years.
Right.
So how do I still can keep the love and calmness to see that, oh, that's not about me. But I can see that's not about me, but I'm suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Like
you're
suffering
right.
in terms of daily life, actual life, that the things
Right.
I have to do extra, the things that the difficulty I'm dealing with. So how do I face that? How do I?
You're taking it personal in a way that you don't think you're taking it personally. And what I mean by this is when you say my life. When you say my life.
Yeah.
Do you see how when you think somebody interrupts your life, that's you taking it personally?
Yes.
Which in the same way as like when someone sees you a certain way, you can take it personally. You can also take other people's actions personally, right? What they do or what they don't do.
But I am suffering. Like,
Yeah.
I have to do much more. I lost a lot. All those things. You know,
Right, see,
it's
and
not just people talking.
right, but all of this, I lost a lot, da 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 da.
Yes.
Where is that happening?
So by the end, it's like an attachment.
But where is it happening? Loss and gain. Where is that happening?
Like, you mean the aspect of life?
Whatever.
Like freedom, money, pressure, a lot of pressure, stress.
And you see that all of that is da 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 da. It's all mental noise. It's stories about how I lost, which makes me feel like this. And then stories of gain makes me feel like this. But you're not responding to anything that's actually happening in the moment. You're literally responding to the stories that you're telling of what you think it means. And so when somebody does something, you give it a meaning that associates it with a gain or a loss. And then you blame them for your interpretation.
Even I don't blame anyone specifically. Things are happening. And I have to deal with them. And then how I can get that peace.
But the question is, what is happening? Because you're saying things are happening, but what seems to be outside of your control is you think something is happening outside of you. Right? That's the frustration. Because now I have to try and do something. Not realizing that the only thing that's happening is happening inside of you.
Tell me more about that.
I jump in.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was really interesting how you started the story. Because the way you started the story, you told me of a woman who is not, I don't want to say you say unpenetrable, but unshaken. You go throughout your day, and if somebody else, you don't care what other people think of you, and you always are, giving love and compassion. Well, that's what I took from it. You give a smile. So whether or not the smile is real, I don't know. But the way that you told the story was, people can't shake you. So what happened? Now you're in a situation in life where you were shaken. Now I see an opportunity for you to find that woman again with the situation you have now, because now the story that you told me before that you liked, that was, I'm grounded, I'm stable, I can do throw anything you want at me. It's like a video game. Throw anything you want at me. I got this. Okay. So I threw something to you. It shook you up. You fell over. You're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. All right. Now how do you get through this? Change your perception of I'm falling, I'm broken, things are terrible. Oh man, like what Tiger was saying, like look, see how I'm acting right now. See how my hands
The
are
story
here.
I already passed. I came out from the storm.
You've come out of the storm.
I came out from the storm. That's why I'm here. So it was past. However, it was really hard. It was really hard. And so, like, I think I could ignore other people's comments, but like actually the imagination of losing the life, losing everything I have in my life, losing the kids, losing everything, and that scared me. Of course, that's a lot of fear. Actually, that totally changed me of all those, because of those years of experience. Is my priority is to fight off fear. Like, I don't want to act out anything that is caused by fear. That's why I'm very interested in all this, because fear, I think, is really the cause of everything.
But it's fear of the future. Because if you
Yes,
lose the kids...
Now I can see that, yeah, because I came out in an attack.
And it's,
But at that moment, it's so difficult.
and it's this image of what will happen.
So difficult. So difficult.
Difficult because we're holding on to something that can be touched by the future.
Yes. Like, I don't want to lose the kids. I don't want to lose my life. I don't want to lose the husband. I don't want to lose anything. I don't want to lose my parents.
Here's a very direct thing to say. You've already lost those things and you haven't realized it yet. When you see that you've already lost them, you'll stop trying to protect those stories.
At that time.
When you see that what you're holding on to cannot be held on to, was never held on to, then there's no more reason to hold on. It's like your fear of losing these things, very human, very understandable, but the fear of losing them says, I have them, right? The only reason you would fear losing them is because you think you have them.
I got this in the first 2 success weeks.
Yeah.
Yes, it's because I thought I had those
Right.
things. I thought I have my kids, I have my parents, I have my life, but maybe I didn't have them.
And that's the source of the insight, is to see that underneath it all, you don't have any of that. And that's the most terrifying thing, because when you start to see that what you're holding on to isn't there at all, now it's like, I have no clue who I am.
So it's almost like the Buddhism, the Buddha always say one thing is, we come with empty hand in this world. With
Exactly. And it's been empty the whole time, and we just imagine ourselves grabbing. Yeah. But you don't ever really. Like, imagine like a relationship. You have a dynamic with, I don't know, a beautiful whatever. And then at some point, the mind tries to hold on to it, right? And the more it does that, then the joy starts to fade. It's no longer magical because the mind thought it got something. And as soon as it thought it got something, it feared losing it, right? And how can you enjoy something if you're afraid of losing it? You can't. You're on defense. And when you're on defense from a fear of losing, now you're trying to control. Now you're super concerned about what the person's doing, right? Because you might not get what you want. And that's always what happens in relationship. And that's when people start getting annoyed with each other. It's like, wait a minute, you're doing things that makes me uncertain, and now I don't know. And so the same thing happens with these things that you're holding on to, is you think they're yours. And I imagine you get irritated with these people because they start to move in ways that don't match your idea. And so as long as you think and believe that you have something, they will forever irritate the shit out of you. And what I'm inviting you to see is that you don't have anything in this world.
also all of this uncomfortable pressure that you've experienced has led you right here, which is allowing you to overcome it and let go of it.
I totally, that one I totally see that, yes.
And so it's beautiful. The fear, and I would hint at maybe there's a fear of fear. It's like you're saying, I don't want to be motivated by fear, which is motivated by fear. And so we can kind of release the quest of getting rid of fear or not wanting fear to move, because that's not up to you. It's like,
Still feel it.
exactly, yeah, you can't get away from it. And it almost sees fear as an obstacle or it's in the way. But actually, the very human experience of fear is a teacher. It's a pointer. And so to allow fear to be fear is to listen to it and you learn from it. Or you spend your life trying to conquer it while cutting yourself off from very intimate aspects of yourself, childlike aspects of yourself. And then we become serious.
Sometimes actually, like just now, you said, oh, I don't care what other people think of everything. Like, actually, it is really interesting that, so for all my friends, I'm super strong. They think I'm superwoman. But for me, the reason that I truly could not care, because I have more serious things to worry about. You understand?
I care about something else.
The cause is
Yeah.
different, you know?
Right.
Okay, whatever you say, whatever you think is so unimportant.
But the root issue is still there. It's like, you can look at it this way. Whether I care about what you think or whether I care about what I think is kind of the same thing.
It's a distraction.
Yeah. It's like underneath it, there's still the same root issue of fear.
Yeah, it's
That's why I want to explain that. It's not that I'm...
Yeah.
Just, for that moment when you thought that, yeah, you care about the things you care, so all those things are too superficial for me to care.
Right.
Because you just talk, you're not affecting me anything. But when it's affecting, like what I'm holding on, life, kids, stability, everything, and I worry that part much more than other people's
Yeah.
comments.
I wonder if we investigated this fear that it revolves around, the family and the future and the security. Those are images of the fear. It's like, okay, I'm scared, it expresses itself this way and this way and this way. But I wonder if we unravel it, what is the fear really? It's like, what is the one fear that makes all these other fears real?
There's a way that I've learned how to get to this root is to say, I'm afraid that I will lose this because, and then and keep saying that until there's no because anymore. Like it'll take you, because if I do that, I'll lose this, and I don't want to lose that because this, and then eventually, if you do that, you'll get to a root.
That's a great exercise. That's a great exercise. And you see how that's just an expression of sincerity. It's like, okay, what's the real issue? Right? It's like, in one way, it's like, oh, I'm scared of losing my partner. Why? Because then I'll be alone. Oh, so I'm more scared of being alone than I am, afraid of losing my partner. Oh, why am I afraid of being alone? Da 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 da.
By the end, I think it's the identity, right?
I'm afraid of losing my identity.
Because the kids,
Yep.
the partner, the life, everything.
Yep. It all comes back to identity. It all comes back to who I think that I am.
Right. Yes.
It's the source of suffering. Every time you're agitated, it's because of a fear of losing who you think you are. Identity. And to investigate the identity, which is spirituality's invitation to investigate who you think you are, you start realizing that, oh, I'm not this. I'm trying to protect this, but I'm not that. You see how silly it would be to protect something that isn't what you are. And so the more you sit and investigate these things, it starts to unravel and you realize, oh, I'm not this, and I'm not this, and I'm not this, and I'm not this.
Because I don't have all those things.
Yeah, and it can be quite disorienting. Like, especially when it's really seen. It's like your whole world flips upside down and you've been transported to a different planet and you don't even know how to function. It's like, how do I even function anymore when I used to function based on this belief? And now that's all gone. What do I do? And that's a whole new adventure.
It is an adventure. It's actually a really good place to be in, because you're focused on so many external things. It's external. You're taking these things and identifying yourself through them. And so if you take them all away, it gives you the opportunity to say, who am I?
Yep. And that's the big spiritual question. That's the only question anyone's asking that's of any relevance. What am I? Who am I?
And how that who or what is untouchable and is always there.
Mm-hmm. See, and that's the self I'm pointing to. Remember when I talk about how to look at a painting that's yours and you see that you're untouchable. It's like whatever they think or say, it doesn't touch you. Because there's no identity in that. And that's the real liberation that might be referred to as awakening, is that you wake up to the reality of what you are that is literally untouched by anything that happens in the world. And in recognizing that you're untouched, you release the world. Do you see? There's no more defense. And do you see how if there's no more defense, it's I love you? Regardless of what you say, regardless of what you think, I love you. One finds a connection with a more real foundation that isn't made up of thoughts. And this foundation isn't something that I can put words to, but I would assume you've had moments of connecting with it. Where it's like you realize all is incredibly well. Not because things look a certain way, but because it's the function of everything. It's almost like you look at the forest and you realize nothing can go wrong here. Everything is literally doing what it's supposed to be doing, so the forest can be the forest. And the same with life. And man, we might use this example every time we get together, but when you zoom out and you look at the forest, you say, holy shit, that's beautiful. Which is like saying, I love you. And then you go for a walk in that forest and it's chaos. There's all the different colors. Nothing is in a straight line, right? There's animals eating other animals. There's things fighting. There's things dying and decaying. It's like it's everything. But when you zoom out, you realize, oh, it's so beautiful because everything is allowed to be what it is. Yes, sometimes there's things that are ugly. Yes, sometimes trees fall over. But it has to be that way in order for life to be life. And it doesn't need my interference because I'm afraid something might be going wrong. And to see such a perfection allows you to engage life in a completely different way. in such a way that you will be perceived as crazy by those who might be playing a different game. And as it relates to the topic of peaceful conversation, before you engage a conversation, it's like you enter with an openness that knows this can't go wrong. That this will literally be whatever it's supposed to be. And it still can't touch the reality of what I am. Sure, I might get scared. Sure, I might think it touches me. That's fine. Again, it's like going into a movie. Yeah, it might get me, you know? I might think that it's real, but that's part of the adventure. And then at some point you come out and you realize, oh, okay. That's why meditation can be such a powerful practice. Like you get to check in, you know? Like if you're doing it 1, 2, 3 times a day, there's these little moments of, oh yeah. And then get lost in the play again. And it's always such a great reality check for me. It's like when I have those disturbances in my interactions with others or circumstance, I always like playing the game of what is this really about? It's kind of the unraveling, you know, of the fear. And I always come to the same conclusion. I'm afraid of losing who I think that I am. Which, you know, is completely understandable. Because to lose who you think you are, you find yourself in a vast emptiness. Right? It's like you don't know who you are, you don't know anything about your future, you don't really know anything about yesterday because it was all imagined. You literally find yourself in a blankness. And that can be scary until you connect with the love that's there. That blankness carries such a divinity to it. It's almost like, man, it's the power that gives birth to everything. It's almost like being scared of a blank canvas, right? Because like, I don't know, it's blank. And then you realize, oh, it's blank. That's fun. I can paint whatever. Any last minute questions or inputs or? In a playful conclusion, what I find is to be the most helpful thing, and again, man, this is like the conclusion to everything that I say, is that it comes down to an openness within yourself. Are you willing to see the real issue? It's like if you have anxiety about a conversation, if you have trepidation, if you have any of these disturbances, are you willing to let this serve healing? Right? Because all of these little disturbances, why are they arising? So that there can be healing. That's what they serve. And you see, that opens you up to feel what you're feeling, which opens you up to get in contact with the real issue. And in such a space of vulnerability, that is what surrenders all facade, all pretending, surrenders itself to the truth, and then the truth moves and heals. And I invite you to recognize the beauty that comes with giving people back to themselves. Letting go of them, which is to not need them to think like you think, not need them to see you a certain way, and to know in your core that they don't have anything that you don't already have. I wrote on Facebook yesterday, if you have any prisoners, you cannot be free. In order to truly be free, you have to release everyone. Notice that if you have prisoners, you have to keep guard. Right? That's a full-time job. And what is a prisoner in this context? Someone that you're trying to get something from. Right? You're afraid of them escaping because you might not get what you want. And so to truly be free, release them. Let them go. Trust them to life. And see that you too are guided. And yes, it can be scary trusting yourself into such a space. I understand that. But it's only through walking into the unknown that you can discover a new depth. Amen. Thanks, guys.